Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our panel discussion this evening. My name is Brenda Rusnak, and I'm the producer of the documentary film Designer Shit, and I am going to be the moderator for today's discussion. So I'd like to begin just by introducing our panelists. We have Saffron Cassidy, the director of Designer Shit, and Al McAdam, her husband and stool donor. We have Charlie Curtis and his mom and stool donor Sky Curtis. And Dr. Tom Borody, a gastroenterologist who also has a PhD and is, without a doubt, the world leader in the field of fecal transplants. Dr. Borody lives in Sydney, Australia, and he has overseen over 16,000 procedures, resulting in a wealth of proprietary data, and he owns over 160 patents. I'd like to start just by giving everybody an opportunity that's on the panel to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about yourself. So we'll start with Saffron.
Hi, my name is Saffron, and I directed the film Designer Shit. And
my name is Al McAdam. I appear in the documentary that Saffron directed.
I am a sufferer of ulcerative colitis, and I was inspired by Charlie and Sky and Dr. Borody's work to do DIY fecal transplant, and Al was my donor.
Okay, thank you. Sky.
My name is Sky Curtis. I'm a writer. I write mysteries, and I was Charlie's donor for a couple of years. And I'm very pleased that he is well.
And Charlie?
Charlie here. Was sick for a long time. And I guess my mom met Dr. Borody through, trying lots of different stuff. And he ended up telling us about the fecal transplant. And my mom was my donor. And I got better.
And last but not least, Dr. Borody.
So I'm a gastroenterologist in practice for 40 years, and we do routine endoscopies and colonoscopies here at our clinic, which is the largest GI clinic in Australia with 60 staff. We've got 2 operating theatres, do 50 procedures a day, and we've got a GMP facility that now makes fecal transplant material, both frozen and in capsules. And we do a lot of fecal transplants, but also treat Crohn's disease, which recently we're just publishing that we have been able to cure Crohn's, and there's a lot of cured ulcerative colitis patients. So they're both curable infections, and so we're quite proud that we can open up this process that other doctors ultimately will not be looking at inflammatory bowel disease as being incurable, but a difficult to cure infection where fecal transplant plays a major role.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start this evening off by having Dr. Borody give us an explanation of what the gut microbiome is and provide a little bit of insight into what may have been the underlying cause of Charlie's Crohn's disease and Saffron's ulcerative colitis.
Okay, so the microbiome is a recently used word which describes the sum total of various bugs in a particular, let's put it, suburb of the body. So you have lots of suburbs, and you'll have a microbiome in the nose, in the lungs, on the skin, left armpit, right armpit. The largest microbiome, the collection, is sitting in our gut. So you can call that poo, whatever you like, but it's made up of living little animals called bacteria, some fungi, and some viruses. And the numbers are enormous. We consider the microbiome, and it's good to take this view, as an organ of the body. It is by far the largest organ, between 30 and 100 trillion cells, whereas our body is 7 to 12 trillion. In some people, therefore, we're 10% human, 90% shit, if you know what I'm saying. And I have friends who are 99%. So the microbiome is essentially the sum total of the living microorganisms in a particular area of the body. And shall I go on to talk about the cause of what?
Yeah, maybe give us a little explanation of what happens to the microbiome when you're diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis?
So the microbiome, because it's open every day to food, is invaded by bacteria, for example, that live on the plate that we ingest. And so you can catch infections that infect the actual microbiome, and that's Salmonella, Shigella, Aeromonas, Clostridia, Yersinia, and various others, and they give you diarrhea and cramping. And then they either get killed by the other bugs, because bugs kill bugs. That's how the fecal transplant works. And so you have local infection with cramping, diarrhea, urgency. You can have infection of the actual tube of the colon, and that's colitis. Colitis is just a layer on the outside. We think it's caused by a Fusobacterium, and then difficult for doctors to understand it, but Crohn's disease is like Johne's disease of animals, and it's caused by Mycobacterium avium subspecies paratuberculosis. That is now proven by Koch's postulates, but it takes about 2 generations of doctors to catch up. So this is a chronic infection of the full thickness of the gut. And then the gut microbiome can produce molecules that enter the bloodstream, and they give you immune conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, or you may have, like autism is caused by Desulfa, Vibrios, and Clostridia. We've done a large number of autism cases. We get at 2 years, 44% don't have autism. That was done in with James Adams over in Arizona State University, published under Kang et al. So the microbiome reaches far into many diseases, especially neurological. So we've got 2 Parkinsonians reversed completely, 3 patients with multiple sclerosis, no longer in wheelchairs. The nerves can regrow. So it's fascinating when you actually are clinically doing it and you're starting to look at a person who previously was so sick. Why hadn't we known this before? I mean, the first FMT that I did was 1988. And the first one I did was a colitis patient. And she's still well without any colitis many years later. So that's the sort of background, and I might stop here because I think I've said too much.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. So let's ask Charlie. Charlie, when did you first get sick, and how did it start?
Got sick in second year university. It started after I was working in Algonquin Park as a tripper, and I came back to school and I just started to have aggressive diarrhea, and then there was blood, and it just sort of got very, very bad in a very quick period of time. It was probably like 3 months, and I went from being, healthy to laying in the hospital very quickly. And then I had, another year and a half, maybe 2 years of being sick. I don't really recall. And then we met Dr. Brody.
And
Such
Sky,
such a smart guy. Saved my life, Dr. Brody.
Don't go to them, mate. It's God's doing.
So, Sky, when did you first get concerned? At what point did you start to think, okay, this is something that's really, really serious and I need to do something about it?
Well, there was a colonoscopy when Charlie was in the hospital, and the head of medicine said, well, I think I can cure this situation with drugs. And the head of surgery said, well, the drugs won't work if your patient's dead. And I was standing outside the door listening to this conversation and thought, I really need to do something a bit more extreme. And so I found a doctor in Toronto that was up on a lot of things. And she mentioned that Dr. Brody in Australia was having some success with C. difficile using fecal transplants. And all along, I'd thought Charlie had an infection because that's what made sense to me. So, and I thought, well, if it works for C. difficile, it's going to work for Crohn's disease. What I didn't know at the time was how long it would take to cure the Crohn's disease. It was almost a year of fecal transplants. But, you know, at the end of the day, you have a healthy person. It was
Sure.
worth.
So, and I'm going to come back to you and ask you how you found Dr. Borody, but first I want to ask Saffron, when you first got sick, and at what point did you start to get concerned enough to start looking at alternative treatments?
Well, like Charlie, I was probably 20, 21 years old. But unlike Charlie, mine didn't come on really quickly. It was kind of a slow burn. So I went on an antibiotic called Accutane, and I really felt some changes in my gut after taking Accutane. There was a period of about a year that I kept getting like stomach bugs. Like I kept feeling like I was coming down with food poisoning. I would have like a 24-hour of like vomiting, diarrhea. And then eventually I started noticing some blood in my stool, and the blood remained. And I was then diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. It was diagnosed as mild at first. I was put on medication that worked well for me. And then over the course of 10 years, the medication just worked less and less. I felt that my condition kept getting worse and progressing, and the medication was doing less for me. So after about a decade of increasing symptoms, I didn't want to continue climbing up the ladder of medication, knowing that the underlying condition was not getting better. It was just getting worse. So I heard about Charlie's story. Actually, there was an article in the Toronto Star about Charlie and Skye that somebody sent me a long time ago. And then Charlie and I happened to have mutual friends. So I met him in person, or I think we had a phone call conversation. I was like, you're the guy from this article that I read 10 years ago that I was so inspired by your story. And Charlie basically said, I'm here to help. What do you want to know? Let's talk. And it was just like this line of hope that I was so desperate for at that time.
So Al, when you first met Saffron, were you aware that she had this chronic illness? And, you know, were you concerned about it at any point?
No, I didn't know about it. Excuse me. I didn't know about it until I met Saffron, and she pretty quickly, as you are getting to know somebody and, you know, dating, you kind of talk about yourselves and learn about one another and all that good stuff. And so I learned a lot very quickly from her, and what this was, and what her state of affairs was, and it sounded horrible. So that's my learning curve was a pretty straight line up in terms of getting into this whole world. And speaking of that phone call, I was in the background of that phone call on our side when Saffron was talking to Charlie. And she was just pacing around the apartment for like an hour, 2 hours or something like that. And it was like really cool to see her get really excited about this and get really like, you know, inspired by you, Charlie, and your whole story and everything. So yeah, I learned a lot very quickly, I think is the answer you're looking for, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Borody, when did you first start doing fecal transplants? You gave us a year, but why did you get into it? Like what caused you to think, okay, I'm going to try this, and give us kind of
So it was May of 1988 when a patient came along who had been to a number of gastroenterologists, and she had diarrhea, nausea, cramping. She was chronically fatigued, and we colonoscoped her as well. She had what's called indeterminate colitis. But she had been to a few others. Someone said that she should go and see a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist admitted her to hospital. I remember she called me. She said, there's all these mad people here. Can I sign myself out? I said, no, stay the 5 days so you can say you were there and didn't help. Then she came back, and I read a paper at that stage from 1958 by a surgeon from Colorado who treated pseudomembranous colitis. And remember, Skye, you probably won't, but Clostridium difficile was not known or cultured then till 78. And he did 4 fecal transplants on people who would otherwise have died because there was 75% death rate when antibiotics started becoming popular. And when I read that paper, I read it to this girl, And I said, look, why don't we do a fecal transplant on you? Because we've tried everything else, all the drugs. And she was not a severe colitis. She just had severe symptoms with patchy colitis. So she agreed, and we used her brother as a donor. Little did I know he was a lawyer, but he was an alcoholic. Perhaps that's what did it, you know. So we gave her the fecal transplant, and she just became so well. And she was so thankful. She invited me to lunch one day, and I remember sitting opposite her. There were no cell phones then. She was called away to a call, and her assistant said, "Oh, Josie is so well. Can you prescribe the same tablets for me?" And of course, we said to Josie, we will not disclose this because I'll get deregistered, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how it
Amazing.
started back in '88, and she has remained well. So the first patient I did was not Clostridium difficile. It was by chance, an indeterminate colitis. We've done lots of colitis since then. So that's the background of the story.
Great. So Sky, tell us the story about reaching out to Dr. Borody, because there was a line in the film, which I love, but just fill us in on how you got his contact information and what you were expecting.
I can't really remember how I actually got his contact information where I could send him an email, but I saw a doctor here in Toronto, and I can't tell you her name because she'd be struck off because she did a lot of alternative things. And she was the one who mentioned this fellow in Australia who was dealing with bacteria in the gut. And so I contacted him, and lo and behold, I couldn't believe it. He contacted me back. And we were off and running. He told me how to do it, which of course didn't work for me in a do-it-yourself kind of way, because it involved holding bags up high and long tubes, and there was just shit everywhere. It was such a mess. So we ended up using the enema squeezy bottle things, and that worked just fine. And on we went. So that's how it happened. And Dr. Borody was always kind, always available, and just helped me so much.
He's blushing. So Saffron, you had a different experience, and you waited a long time not to disclose what you were doing with your gastroenterologist. Why was that?
I had brought up fecal transplant to my gastroenterologist many times. Every appointment for several years, I was bringing it up. I would say, have you been following what's been going on at McMaster University? Because there was a fecal transplant for colitis trial going on. And he would say, no, I haven't really. Or he would say, I haven't seen anything that's convinced me that this is worth you trying yet, which is interesting because we were looking at the same data from that trial. And I was thinking, this data is showing me that I should be trying fecal transplant sooner rather than later. And he wasn't seeing that. He wanted me to continue on medication. So I did not disclose to him when I started doing fecal transplant. Because I thought that he wasn't interested. He didn't have any expertise in it. He wasn't really going to be able to help me anyway. That became kind of stressful because I do wish I had a doctor monitoring me throughout the process, but he might have stopped me from doing it if I had brought it up to him. He might have talked me out of it, and I'm glad that I didn't let him do that because it worked out very well for me that I did it.
Great. So Dr. Borody, there are risks obviously in doing FMT, and we hear about it a lot. Can you tell us what those risks are, and how have you managed to mitigate those risks in your practice over the years?
Well, the risks are fairly clearly infecting someone with a bug that is in the donor stool. So it's not too difficult to reduce that risk by taking a long history from the potential donor. We're kind of looking for donors now because we have a unit here that is a GM, good manufacturing practice unit, that makes the biologic, it's now called, of that is stool. But if you interview patients and you remove those who've had recurrent antibiotics, got a chronic illness, or we don't take people who've had tattoos, for example, because they may have been injected not just with Hep C, but other viruses that we can't measure. So we avoid those who've been in jail, and those who lived in Britain during the mad cow disease period, because prions are very hard to work with. We can't measure them. So we try to take the high road by excluding by history about 80%. Then we do stool tests, blood tests, etc. And so you can minimize the risk. Some want their own relatives to be the donor. We tend to use non-relatives, although Sabine Hazan tends to use close relatives. We're going more for children because they haven't walked the earth very long and they haven't had a chance to pick up a lot of bad bugs. So all these things take years to finally penetrate my brain, and there's not a lot of risk to start with, and we've reduced that, so we've never infected anybody. We've done about 16,000 with 37,000 individual infusions, probably more than that now. But see, ultimately, I think it will be freeze-dried, encapsulated fecal transplantation, which is what we're currently setting up to do autistic children in the States with a large company. So you can reduce those risks by being very careful to remove potential infection in a donor stool.
And do you pay your donors?
Just repeat that, please.
Do you pay your donors, or in the past, have you paid your stool donors?
We pay them $50, and that's the second income. And we also do metagenomic studies for COVID. Most places do not. OpenBiome doesn't because it's very expensive, but we can do it. We have a metagenomics lab, and we can tell whose stool it is. That's always the same person. So they can't substitute a stool because we'll be able to tell them and they're out. They know that.
Okay.
They travel, they're overseas or something, they're out. If they take antibiotics, they're out for 6 months.
Okay. Well, Al, it's a good thing you never got a tattoo. No getting tattoos just in case you have to.
I was gonna ask, does Sky Curtis have any tattoos?
No,
So Sky and Charlie and Saffron and Al, you were aware of the risks involved. And what were your thoughts on the risks? And what did you do to try to limit them?
Yeah, I was aware of some of the risks. I was told that some of those risks were lessened by the fact that we were partners who share a home and share a lot of germs. I also knew Al's health history, and he is a very healthy person who really matches the criteria of any high quality stool donation program. The only thing is that we weren't really able to test his stool aside from just a standard test because I didn't have a doctor who was going to support me and kind of go through this list of like the nitty gritty of every single little thing that he might have contracted throughout his life. We did a standard stool test for travel related bugs and pathogens. And that was the level of control that I had. And it was a risk that I was willing to take based on that.
And Sky and Charlie, how about you? Were you concerned about the risks?
I just went to get my poo tested, and it was fine. I also knew I had been, and I was a very healthy person. I hadn't taken antibiotics in 25 years, and I very regular, ate well. I was a bit concerned because I was drinking alcohol, but I stopped after I got the very good news there was nothing wrong with my liver from a blood test. And I thought, oh, that's the end of that. And Yeah, did I think there were risks? No, I didn't really, because, you change baby diapers all the time. And is there risk in that? Not if you wash your hands, you take, some precautions. So I didn't think there was a lot of risk. I just didn't want to give Charlie anything weird. And I don't think I did.
Okay.
Weird enough already, Mom.
Yes,
And
thanks.
and for me, risk wasn't really an issue. We had exhausted so many different options, and yeah, try anything.
Okay, there's a lot of audience questions, but I want to get through the next question because I think it's kind of it's an interesting question for Dr. Borody, and that is, so in 2013, the FDA, which is the United States board that overlooks drugs, determined that FMT was a drug, not a tissue, because the way it interpreted US law and interpretation of the word human, the FDA determined that the microbiota is not human and therefore does not qualify as human cell, tissue, or transplant. Health Canada adapted the same determination. But this is not consistent in all countries. European law is different. Dr. Borody, can you tell us how I guess it's the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia has interpreted it? Is the gut microbiota a tissue or a drug? And how has it affected the regulatory pathway in Australia versus Europe and the United States?
Thank you for that. We just had our TGA, we call it Therapeutic Goods Authority, because we're having our unit, which is a GMP, Good Manufacturing Practice unit, being licensed for being able to export the product. So they call it a biologic. They don't call it a drug, but it has similar meaning. At one stage, we wanted to call it an organ because there is no laws for organs like kidneys are not considered a drug. But they didn't want to call it an organ because it's not made up with enough different tissues. But they've taken the situation that because we've done so many, they wanted to learn. So in fact, the lady Alice, who's the chief of that, wanted us to give them a talk, and we did. And we thought we were talking to 20 people on Zoom and turned out to be 150. Today, right now, there are 28. So they were very excited because instead of being just pen pushers in our capital city in Canberra, where TGA is mostly located, they actually realized they're doing something good for mankind. Now, we will have license to be able to do Clostridium difficile, much more difficult in the US. We don't have to make an application. We simply are a licensed manufacturer that can use it on whatever we like, essentially. This is not yet 100% confirmed, but we expect early January to have the piece of paper signed by the TGA. But we use good laboratory practice, GLP, so anyone who comes here, we can do whatever fecal transplant we like. The most common one we do is for diarrhea predominant irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, and end-stage Crohn's when we've treated them with antibiotics to replace their flora. But we also do some odd ones who have two conditions. And so for Parkinson's have constipation, so we treat their constipation and they get significantly better in their tremor. But in terms of restrictions by the TGA, I have a feeling that the regulatory pathway will be biologics, and you need to have a good GMP supply laboratory, which is what we have.
So let me ask a few audience questions because there are a lot, and most all are directed towards Dr. Borody. So can fecal transplant be used to treat IBS as opposed to IBD?
Can we use it to treat IBS?
Yeah, is it effective in treating IBS?
Oh, yes. Look, it's effective. I wrote a paper recently called the Encyclopedia of Fecal Transplantation, and we had 85 different conditions that you can treat. But IBS is so common, so patients come and complain about problems. Can we treat it? In fact, on Wednesday, just a couple of days ago, this lady landed from Vietnam, and she brought a big present. I've never heard of her before, didn't even know she was coming from Vietnam. Brought a big present, and she wanted a fecal transplant tomorrow. She was in irritable bowel syndrome, right? Severe pain, cramping, diarrhea, nausea, recurrent bouts of it, sometimes constipation. So that is an infection of the gut flora, usually with Clostridia, which are non-Clostridium difficile. And in diarrhea predominant IBS, it works better than in constipation predominant. Whereas constipation is also probably a narcotic producing Clostridium because it responds well to vancomycin, rifaximin, tinidazole, etc. But we've not been able to identify the pathogen. That IBS works, yes.
Okay. Somebody asked, they're actually receiving FMT right now, and they asked if they have to change their diet, or do you recommend changing their diet or a specific type of diet following FMT?
Well, we just recommend people to eat that which the infused families of bacteria will eat, and they tend to thrive on various fiber-like foods. And so our dietitian takes them through a process of putting them on a fiber-rich diet. That's the basic. But essentially, like Mark Twain said, eat what you like, let it fight it out inside.
Right. Okay, I'm going to have one more question from the audience, and then we'll go back to the other questions. And I'm not sure what AMAT therapy is, but Dr. Borody, do you still recommend the AMAT therapy prior to FMT for Crohn's? We did 65 FMTs on our son using our daughter's stool. However, she got Giardia.
You have
process.
I cannot catch every word you say, but are you asking whether we use antibiotics before?
Is that, what is it? It's an acronym, AMAT therapy. Do you know what that is?
AMAT, antimycobacterial avian paratuberculosis. Yes, that's what we use in Crohn's disease. And to get a cure in Crohn's, we use AMAT until we don't find any inflammation. So someone comes along with deep ulcers, strictures, fistulae, and we have a program for each one of these. So we can get fistulae to go by scraping the fistula, compressing it from the inside by putting bandages in the rectum for 6 hours, and then they close. But you've got to scrape it or curette it. We start people with antibiotics. That's called AMAT, anti-mycobacterium avium tuberculosis treatment. And those antibiotics kill very slowly because it's a highly, it's the slowest growing bacterium known to mankind. Urine tract infection bacteria can divide in 15 to 20 minutes. This divides in 1 year. And you can only kill it when it divides. So we're dealing with a very unusual infection. But because I had a background in treating tuberculosis, when I lived in the Solomon Islands in 78, I learned that you need multiple antibiotics like you do for TB, and you need to treat it long. So when we started using AMAT, I only used 2 drugs, then 3, now we use 4, and we get healing fairly quickly. And then when you have healing, we flush the person out and give them recurrent fecal transplants like Sky did with Charlie. And you need to give recurrent because there is a movement in the biofilm, and it's like the sea. If you're out on a ship in the middle of the ocean, it's not a flat sea, it's moving, right? And the same thing with the biofilm, and it'll expose the mucosa, and that's when your donor stool implants. And after multiple infusions, you'll have the donor stool predominantly in the layer of mucosa, which is the film. It's easy to put it down the center of the tube of the colon, but to implant it is the trick. If you don't implant, you don't change the behavior of the bowel. So yes, we do use AMAT followed by FMT, and we're just writing up our next series of cured Crohn's. Cured means 3 years off all therapies and well.
And that's Charlie. So Charlie and Sky, how many FMTs did you do and how often?
We started out with, well, first of all, I did see a question pop up about did Charlie not need the antibiotics? And the truth of the matter is, Charlie was on antibiotics for a full year from Dr. Barodi, and they would come in the mail until Customs got wise to it. Stop that. Anyway, so we did a fecal transplant with Charlie every day for a month, every second day for a month, every third day for a month, every fourth day for a month, every fifth day for a month, every sixth day for a month, and then once a week for the remainder of the year. So it was a lot. And it totals about 96 fecal transplants.
We did a lot of them, eh, Mom?
We did a lot. Yeah.
We
What
did
a
a
year
lot.
that was for you, Charlie.
Not my
Only
favorite of my years, right?
Only a mother would do that, Charlie. You had a
Yeah.
devoted mother. You're very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And Saffron, how many did you have?
Yeah, I think I started doing 10 days in a row because that's what they were doing at McMaster at the time. And I did have some relief, and then my symptoms came back. And then I asked Charlie, I thought this was working. My symptoms came back, and Charlie said, you have to do it every day for a month, then every other day for a month. So then we followed their protocol. And my symptoms came back a couple of times actually after weaning off, and I would always go back to every day for a month. So over the course of 2 years, a lot of start and stops. I think we did about 200 fecal transplants.
So
Wow.
Dr.
Yeah.
Brody, why does C. difficile only require 1 or 2 transplants versus Crohn's colitis, which obviously seems to require a lot of them to get a result?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
So anyone can get rid of C. difficile because the biofilm is only 30 micrometers. In colitis and Crohn's, it's 450. A biofilm is the hard part on your tooth that requires ultrasound sometimes to get rid of. So it appears to be that the film that matters, and to overcome its fluctuations, you need multiple infusions. So that is what you do. Currently, we're working on dissolving film, and so that you can do it all in one day, right? But we're not there yet, and I experiment on myself. I've had 3 fecal transplants testing the theories, and that's why it's so simple to knock off C. difficile. But it's interesting, Clostridium difficile comes in a format whereby it has like a bacterium called a vegetative state and a spore at the end, a terminal spore. Now, antibodies can kill the vegetative, but nothing touches the terminal spore. So when you stop a single fecal implant, you may still have spores. We use 2 implants for C. difficile. We get a 98% cure within 2 days. But stool kills spores, and no antibiotics do. So what is it in that stool that kills it? Well, it's some unknown antibiotic-like agent that can kill things we cannot kill with currently known antibiotics. It's a fascinating world out there. You know, that microcosm, if you could just walk through the bowel, look at the mucosa, look at the film, say hello to this bacterium, that bacterium, you've got to imagine yourself living in there and how you can fix it because you've got bugs in there that give you colitis or give you diarrhea, cramping, or go up the nerves to your putamen and substantia nigra, end up with Parkinson's. So it's easier to kill, a thin filmed bacterial infection.
So when I read about studies that are done to test FMT treatment on Crohn's and colitis and other conditions, the studies usually involve like maybe 10 FMTs. So if they're studying the effectiveness of FMT for Crohn's colitis, how can they expect to get a result if they're only giving 10 treatments?
Bad
that-
design equals bad result.
Yeah, like is that it so how can they say that it doesn't work if they're like, they can say that 10 treatments don't work, but how can they say that it doesn't work? Because, you know, people that do it over and over and over again, proof, 2 people sitting here, for Crohn's colitis did see really positive results.
It's people like Sky, Charlie, and Saffron that have caused us to learn how to do it better. And if you've got someone who just reads about it rather than having personal experience, they'll design a trial which is doomed, and then they publish it.
Right. Okay. I have another audience question that I want to get to. Have minors under 18 had success with fecal transplants?
Yes.
Dr. Brody?
Could you just repeat? I'm trying to read my little notes that I wrote here.
Yeah. Have minors under the age of 18?
18. I see there's a question here on the side.
Yeah.
Yes, no, we've done younger people, and we've done pediatrics fecal transplants in autistic children. There we use capsules. And remember, the success is not success of the FMT. It's success in reversing the condition that is being treated, right? It is difficult to reverse autism. But if you've got C. difficile, we use 18 capsules and we can cure more than 95%, even in, well, you don't get it much in children, but it doesn't matter with age, but it works in young as well as old.
Okay. So Sky and Al, I want to ask you, and we can start with Al. Do you have a sense of pride knowing that you clearly have really good shit?
Yeah, obviously. That's why I'm here on the Zoom with you all. No, it's a fluke. Excuse me. It's a fluke. We talk about this list from the tattoo one we just learned about today, of this fitting into this perfect criteria. It's more like a humbling honor, actually, as opposed to pride, because it's like, wow, I get to help the person that, you know, I care the most about. So it's more about helping that person as opposed to pride in your own good, healthy shit. For me.
How about you, Sky? Do you brag about having great shit?
Never. No. I'm with Al on that. My pride comes from helping other people and you know, telling them how to do it. And in fact, it got to the point where I was so busy helping other people that I had to stop. And I wrote a book about it instead. And so now if people call me, I say, go get the book and follow it. And they get better. And I take pride in that. I think it's wonderful to help other people when they're suffering.
So have you supplied anybody else with your poo?
I had a poo camp about years ago. A friend of mine with MS was very constipated, so I helped her. And then there was another young woman who I helped with my own poo because she was isolated and she didn't have anybody else, not even a neighbor to help. So, but no, I'm not in the business of giving other people shit.
I've tried to get her to turn into an empire.
I'm sure you have. Charlie, the entrepreneur. Al, how about you? Have you been approached by anybody, or would you consider being a donor?
No one's asked, really. I think people maybe have been curious, but no, I haven't gotten any formal requests. Whether I would or not, I guess so. Yeah, it's about helping some people for sure. Um, I don't know. I'd have to think about it and how it all kind of came up, but no, no one's asked.
Okay, I had we did a panel discussion earlier today, and one of the, or it was yesterday actually, and one of the panelists suggested that being a donor for somebody that's going through FMT, do-it-yourself style, that the donor themselves would be completely stressed out because it requires such a long time, like a couple of years, and that could negatively affect their health because they'd be so stressed by knowing that they had to eat properly and remain really, really healthy for the person that they were supplying the stool to. Al and Sky, did you ever feel stressed about that? Did you ever think, oh God, I'd like to have a Big Mac, but no, I can't because I have this very important role? And was it stressful for you knowing that somebody was relying on you?
Well, as I said earlier, I had to stop drinking. That was a bit, that was hard. But that was sort of fun. And I never had any caffeine in my diet, and I'm not one to take medication. So no, it didn't really stress me in any way. I'm just so regular, right? I wake up, I fart, and I poo, you know. And it never crossed my mind that I wouldn't. So it was no, it wasn't stressful.
Okay, Al.
Yeah, no, I agree. No stress. The stress would be from seeing the person in your life suffering, right? That was stressful. And so, looking for a bathroom, scoping out where the bathrooms were in every place that we went to, where was the direct line to where, if anything, speeding down the highway to find an exit if there was going to be a situation or an accident, that was stressful. This, eating right and getting rest and abstaining from certain things. I never went too extreme either, but I mean, I kept it pretty straight and narrow while we were doing it. Yeah, so no stress really for me.
Okay. So another audience question, Dr. Borody, you talked about fecal transplant capsules. How effective are they known to be, and are they on the market now?
Okay, just to add to the anxiety one, I tend to feel that the anxiety is from inability to reach the bathroom on time rather than the other way. With respect to the capsules, we use the capsules freely here because we make quite a lot. And they work just as well, but they, of course, span the entire distal small bowel because they're double encapsulated. And so I think the future is in capsules. There's a company called Seres, SCRES, that makes capsules for C. difficile, but I understand they cost about $1,000 a capsules. So that's a little bit beyond the price of most people can reach. But then C. difficile does kill quite a few people, like 15 to 20,000 per year. And so paying $17,000 for 12 capsules to save a life is still not that expensive. But capsules will probably predominate in the future. Giving enemas is best delivered to the area where the colitis is, like saffron, because colitis usually starts at the rectum, moves up the bowel, and peters out. So that's the highest concentration of the fecal transplant is there. So we make both liquid, frozen, or capsules as a product.
Okay. So just another personal question. I'm going to jump back to Saffron and Al and Charlie and Sky. How did doing fecal transplants together change your relationship, or did it? Like Charlie and Sky, were you a close a close pair to begin with, because it's pretty intense doing fecal transplants with somebody for that over that period of time.
Yeah, I've always been close with my mom. I've always been a bit of a mama's boy. Right, Mom?
That's right. Sweet fun.
And Saffron and Al, how about you?
You go ahead, Seth.
I don't think it changed much at all. Mind you, he was just doing like the donation, as we called it. So he would just leave it in the bathroom. I'm the one who did all the blending and got really up close and personal with his shit.
It brought us pretty close together pretty quickly. I'll say that, you know. You really decide whether you're all in with somebody or not through an experience like this. And I don't know. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I didn't have a second thought when this first was proposed. I was like, oh yeah, when do we start? Let's do this.
Al has no like embarrassment talking about this kind of stuff. I was kind of more squeamish or embarrassed about talking about my condition, and I'm really lucky to have met Al, because right away when I was like, I have to tell you I have this condition, he's like, I don't give a shit, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, he's always been very relaxed about it, which is exactly what I needed when I was suffering and so stressed out about it and so embarrassed and ashamed of it.
Yeah, let's figure it out. And meeting the people that we have over this whole journey in this film, from your family to Sky and Charlie to Dr. Barodi, it's like we met some pretty cool characters along the way of this whole thing. So it's like it's been pretty cool.
Good. Okay, we only have 5 more minutes. So, Dr. Barodi, I want to ask you where you think the industry is heading, and what's your prediction of when FMT will be available for Crohn's and colitis, but also for other conditions that I know are highly studied right now, like autism, metabolic syndrome, and bipolar depression.
Well, I think the industry is starting to recognize that the microbiome is a large organ that has avoided being looked at for many years. It's time to catch up. So I was on Zoom with a US a company yesterday with sort of 15 people on the Zoom, and we're focusing on, firstly, for some reason they want to go for autism, and that will be done with bowel prep capsules, and the treatment will be stepped down from larger number of capsules to smaller. So that will be one aim, but they've also expressed the interest in doing these terrible diseases that kill you in the end, and that is Parkinson's disease, which we have treated, and with some Alzheimer's, because you can get memory to come back within 2 weeks. It's fascinating. Rheumatoid arthritis, that's more of an immune disease where your molecules come out of the microbiome into the bloodstream, you get antibodies formed, and then you form a lattice work which drops into joints. You can get glomerulonephritis from that as well. So we listed those conditions in that paper on over 80 different treatments. And amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig syndrome, that's a terrible disease, and you die from that, and you can't move your arms or legs. So there's a lot of neurological diseases, like MS, for example, that Sky treated. I'm not sure where the patient got out of the wheelchair or not, but I've seen 3. We wrote up 3 out of a wheelchair. And so it's very satisfying when you see someone that you've made a difference for by going against the current thinking process, like we did when we developed triple therapy for Helicobacter. There's no ulcers left now. The pandemic is gone in this country, at least. So yes, the future will be that more and more companies will recognize it, but you've got to make the product to be compliant with good manufacturing practice. And I think slowly the FDA will open up as you approach it for various indications. I think that's where it'll go.
Any prediction on timelines? Like, are we talking a year? Are we talking 10 years?
Probably 5. I mean, we're starting our project, which will start by about June, but we'll probably do several projects simultaneously as we add on to the various projects within that company, which I cannot name here.
That's great. One other question for Saffron, real quick. Saffron, the film title is provocative. Poster art is interesting. Can you tell us how you landed on both and what's the significance of the $ in the word shit?
I think when I first heard about fecal transplant, I had this dream that in the future there would be these products of manipulated microbiomes that would cure any ailment. We'd be creating designer shit, and I do think that there's still a future for that. The $ in the name was you actually can't have a business account on Instagram with the word shit. Likewise, we couldn't have our film on iTunes with the word shit, so the $ helps us solve that problem.
Crafty.
And just one last question for Charlie and Saffron. Charlie, tell us how you're feeling.
Feel great.
Health-wise.
Feel good. Yeah, healthy, you know, 100 and I think that when I was first talking to Dr. Barodi, I was probably like 120 pounds. I was just very skinny and just going to the bathroom all the time. And now I go to the bathroom once a day, and I go to the gym every day, and I'm 190 pounds. And yeah, it's a complete
That's great. And
turnaround.
how long has it been for you?
I'd have to go back into my old email and hunt him down, but but many years. I don't know, 8 years, 9 years. I don't know, maybe more.
Amazing.
Long time.
And Saffron, how are you feeling?
Yeah, remission for 3.5 years. I still take a 5-ASA medication, which is the medication I was prescribed at the beginning that didn't work anymore. I'm kind of slowly weaning off that. I don't always take it, but I have this fear of letting it go. But I eat whatever I want. I've been through 2 pregnancies and postpartum and not sleeping and stress and all these things that used to cause me to flare. And yeah, through all these life cycles that I've been through for 3.5 years, I've not had a single symptom. And that's incredible. I could have never imagined my life looking like this 3.5 years ago.
Last word, Dr. Brody.
So I would like to ask Saffron, being in the art world, I think you should compile a book of various jokes and sayings. For example, if someone's constipated, they don't give a shit, right? But if they finally go, well, look, shit happened. So you got a lot of these sort of quotes and things that could be put into chapters of books if you want to, like a definition of an ignoramus, someone who's both stupid and an asshole, right? So that
Well, you should be doing a comedic tour, Dr. Brody. I think you're a bit of a stand-up comic yourself.
you should have a collection to have it in the addition part of the book, jokes to use at parties when you're in deep shit, you know.
Yeah.
Saffron,
Well,
Saffron, we'll do a brainstorm.
Yes.
sounds good. Sounds like a good plan. Well, thank you everyone for joining this panel this evening. And thank you, Dr. Brody, for helping both Saffron and Charlie. I know that they are just so appreciative of you. I want to remind everyone that Designer Shit is now available. You can stream it on Amazon, Apple TV, and Vimeo, or you can buy or rent it off our website, designershitdocumentary.com. Thank you very much. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. A lot of the questions didn't get answered. Some of them we can't answer, like the doctor in Toronto. But please, if you do have questions that weren't addressed, send them to info@designershit.com and we will do our best to answer them. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.